Hey there, this is Laura with Mom Envy, and today we're going to be creating these adorable Easter basket tags.
Now I'm using an xTool P2 laser machine, but you can use a different laser machine or you could even use a craft machine as long as it can handle cutting thin wood, or you could also use a different material like paper or acrylic. But for today's example, I'm going to be using wood and showing you with a laser machine. Now the very first thing you need to do is to place your wood inside of your machine, and let me show you what that looks like now.
So I've placed my wood on my honeycomb inside of my P2, and I've used these magnetic clips that came with it to make sure it's nice and secure.
So our wood is placed, and once we do that, we need to come over here to the upper right-hand corner and click the refresh button. This will just take a screen capture of what is happening exactly in our machine right now. And it's super important to do this anytime you are changing anything inside of the machine. After that, I'm going to change my settings on the right-hand side. Since I'm using my honeycomb, I'm going to be using this open plane setting because I find it works best with a honeycomb. The next thing you want to do is to measure your distance. Now you can do this after you insert the file, but I prefer to do it beforehand because sometimes it will adjust the level of focus for the camera, which will then move where your design is. So on the right-hand side, we're going to click this plus sign, and it will bring up a rectangle, and I'm just going to click somewhere on my board. All right, so it has successfully measured, and now we're ready to input my design. Now I have created a whole bunch of different tags, and I will show you the final results of each one in photos, but I'm only going to show you an example of how to cut one, and I've actually chosen one that I think is harder than the other ones because it does involve layering the materials. So up here in the upper left-hand side, we're going to click the image icon, and then I'm going to scroll down, and for this example, I'm going to be doing our bunny head SVG. I'm going to go ahead and say to not scale it.
I actually should have said to yes, scale it, because I thought I'd already resized the file before I saved it, but I accidentally had forgotten. So these just ended up a little larger than I meant them to be. You can see over here that it looks like I actually have a bunch of different bunnies, and what it is these ones are actually going to be layers because again we are going to be making a layered wooden tag for this example.
Which means I only really need to cut out these bottom two on the left side. Instead, I'm going to cut these ones on the right here out of a 3M backed wood because then I can layer it. The other thing you could do is actually cut it out of acrylic because wood and acrylic look really nice together. But for today's example, I'm just going to use wood. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything that I don't want to work with and I want to put on a different material. So I'm going to select all of that, and then I'm going to right click and go down to cut. And then down here you can create a new canvas by hitting this plus sign, but I already have one. And then I'm going to right click and say paste. And I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my other canvas, and now I can take this bunny head and I can move it up here. So before I cut, I need to make sure I change my settings. I always use red for cut in all of the files that you're going to get from me. So anytime there's a red line, it's actually really helpful because you can go ahead and know that that means you're going to cut. So I'm going to, down here in my layers panel, click my layer 1, and then I'm going to click the cut button. I'm going to change my settings for the wood that I'm using. I'm going to do a power of 100 and a speed of 60. Now I will tell you that your machine is going to be different than mine. Even if you were to buy the exact same wood I have from Amazon and you're using a P2, your machine may cut differently. So please, if you're using a material that is new to you, make sure you go ahead and do some sort of grid test or some sort of example test first so that you aren't wasting a ton of material. Believe me, learn from my mistakes and make sure you do tests first. Now, before I cut this, I'm actually going to move this over slightly just so that I can save a little bit of wood. All right, and that's it. We're ready to go ahead and do our bottom layer. So I'm going to In the bottom right hand side, I'm going to click my process button, which will then bring up the preview of what is going to cut. And then I'm going to click this start button, and I will show you over on my machine what that looks like.
Okay, so my machine is ready to cut, so I'm going to push the blue glowing button to get it started. And now I'm not going to show you the entire process because, well, that would be pretty boring. But I will show you the first little bit of this, and then I will show you what it looks like at the end when it's done cutting. All right, so I'm all finished cutting. And now we're going to move on to our next layer. I have my 3M backed wood. This is just a scrap piece I use for something else, and I'm going to place it inside of my machine so that I can cut my top layer. The 3M makes it really easy to adhere it, but you could also just use glue. I just turned it around to make sure I'm using the most of the space that I have.
Okay, so I put in my 3M backed wood. We're going to go to our other canvas where we place our other layers. And now on the upper right hand side, again, because I've done something in my machine, I'm going to click refresh. Then over on the right hand side, I'm going to go down again to open plane, which, as you can see, it definitely changed the distance of my camera. And then I'm going to click the plus button to measure my thickness of my material. And I'm just going to click somewhere on my wood. And it's going to take it a little bit of a second to do this. Okay, so I'm going to be making a boy bunny and a girl bunny, one with a bow up in the ear and the other one with a bow up in its hair. So I'm just going to place these a little bit lower. And then it gets a little bit trickier because with this layer, I still want to be able to put the child's name. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it right here. I'm going to fit this other guy next to it. And actually, I'm going to end up turning this bunny's head around probably. But first, I want to design what the name is going to look like. So I'm just going to be doing this for 2 kids. And I'm going to show you directly in xTool how you do the text because it is a little bit different.
Now, xTool is working on fixing this. Right now, they already have it in the beta version, and hopefully that will roll out soon.
Okay, so the name of the first child is going to be Harper. And I'm going to go ahead and change the font. So this is where it gets weird, is over here, I actually have to type in this text box within xTool, which makes it a little bit complicated. That's okay. So we're going to find the name Harper, find a font that we like to use. I'm going to go into my KA fonts, and I'm going to go with the print because these are for 2 littler kids, and so I find that print is easier for them to be able to read. I'm going to try this Baked Goods font. And now what I need to do is shrink this down to make sure that her name is going to fit inside of the layer of the bunny's head. But I'm going to go ahead and put it right inside of my bunny's head because I might as well use up that wood that's on the inside. So now I know that's definitely going to fit. And if I'd wanted to, I could have actually done this as an engraving on the bottom layer, but I like the look of the wood popping out. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this wood. So now I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste this because I want to make sure that my font is the same. And it's just quicker to do it this way. And then over here in the text, I'm going to change it to my second child, which is the name Logan. And I'm going to put both of these in here because they'll both fit. Then I'm going to highlight this whole bunny head and the names, and I'm going to rotate them around. Take this and shift it over a little bit, and that way it just uses a little bit less of our wood. Then I'm going to see if there's any chance of one bow tie is going to fit in here, and I think that it might. It is. It's going to be tight, but it will fit. And this is just going to save me some wood by doing it this way. And that's why I just put those off to the side. And I wish I could fit this here, but I don't know. I might be able to right here. I think it's going. And guys, this is the kind of stuff you want to do if you want to try to save wood. I know it seems like a little silly, but when you make a lot of projects, especially if you're actually a small business owner, all that wasted wood is money. All right, so I actually got all of that to fit over here in this little space. And I'm going to go ahead and change, again, my cut settings. So I will click on my red layer in this layer panel. I will click cut. And then I'm going to use the same power. Even though I've added the 3M, I actually find that the same power is going to work just fine. So I've changed it to a power of 100 and a speed of 60. I'm going to click the process button, which will bring up a sample of what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to press the start button, and then I will show you what it looks like over in my machine.
All right, so we're ready to go. I'm just going to click the blue glowing button, and that will begin our cut. I'm not going to show you the entire thing, but I will show you what it looks like at the end. All right, so we're all done cutting. Now I'm going to go ahead and take out the little layers. So you can see here is the layer that will sit on top of the base that we already cut. And then we have the bows, which you can either put down below like a bow tie, or you can put up on the ear so it's like a little bow. Now I'm going to show you a little trick that I use when I'm trying to get words out that I've cut in wood. I actually take some painter's tape and I just place it over top of the wood. And then what I'll do is then I will take out the whole piece and I'll pop it out, because this will just keep my letters from falling through the grate, and it just makes it a lot easier if the letters are all together. I don't have to worry about trying to find all the little tiny pieces. So I'm going to be putting together our basket tags, and I want to show you an example of why I cut a square around my letters sometimes, because the one example I didn't do this with, but I did do it with my other ones. So for this peep here, I'm going to use the box that I cut out around the word for my son's name, and then I'm just going to place it where I think I'd like it. And now it's going to be really easy to place my letters on. So what I'm going to do is, again, I use the 3M on the back. So I'm just going to peel this off. I grab tweezers in case I need them. Sometimes it's helpful because it can be a little tricky. And then all I need to do is drop my letter inside and push down. Then you're just going to keep going with the other letters. I'm going to speed the video up so that you don't have to watch the entire thing. Once you have all of your letters placed, you're just going to very gently pull the stencil back up. And now it just makes sure that, as you can see, that my letters are perfectly spaced just like I had planned for them to be. All right, so now we're going to be doing our layered bunny. I do have a stencil for the names for my bunny, but these aren't placed perfectly within the bunny because I wanted to use as little material as possible. So I'm not going to put on the outer frame first. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and place my letters. And I'm actually going to tape down because this name is really delicate. So I think it's going to take a lot of pressure to get it to stick. So I'm just going to go ahead and tape down my stencil so that way, and make sure I adjust it before I really squeeze the tape on because I think I got a little crooked. Okay, so I have it taped down and I'm ready to put my letters in. I actually already removed the 3M backing for my first letter. So I'm just going to take my tweezers, and I have to be so gentle with this one because the letters are super, super thin. I'm going to go ahead and continue putting the letters in, and then I'm just going to speed up the video so that way you don't have to watch the very slow process of me doing this. Okay, so I've got all of my letters in place, and now I just need to make sure that I really push them down. And I'm going to speed up showing you this because on the video, because you don't need to watch me sit here and try to push this on. You could also just sit a book on this and leave it for a little while. Once the letters are in place, you're going to very carefully remove the tape from the stencil. Okay, so now that we have our letters on, we can place our outer bunny layer. So I'm just going to remove the 3M very carefully because, again, these pieces are very thin, so you just want to be careful so you don't accidentally snap it. And before pushing down, just make sure you really got it in place. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to push. Now, before I do my next step, which is adding the bow, I'm actually going to place this underneath of something just to make sure that it gets nice and secure. And then I will come back and show you the final step of putting on the bow. So the next step is, now that these have set, because I had a book on them and they're nice and secure, is we are going to add our bows. So again, I have got 3M on the back of this. Now for Harper's, I'm going to put the bow up by the ear. I'm going to press down to make sure it's nice and secure. And then for Logan, I'm just going to put his bow right down here. And that's it. The only thing left to do is to add on our ribbon. So here are all of our final tags. As you can see, there's so many different ways that you can customize these. So with the peeps, I just added some wood cutout names. I did a similar thing with the carrot where I painted it and then I just used 3M on the back of the wood for the name and adhered it. For this one, I actually didn't even do anything to the wood below. All I did was add a painted name. Same with this one. I just engraved the design on the bottom and then I added a wood painted name on top. These, of course, are the two that you already saw, Logan and Harper. Two more engraved and painted with a wood name put on top, two different versions of a flower. On this one, all I did was engrave and paint. And for these two, I did the same thing. All I did was engrave and used my acrylic paint pens to paint these. And lastly, you can also just engrave and not add any sort of color at all. And it still looks really great.